In 2018, Xbox announced they were starting a brand new studio called The Initiative. 2 years later, they revealed their new game, a reboot of Perfect Dark. Finally, Joanna Dark was coming back. Unfortunately, things haven't gone great, and it's looking like it's still going to be a little while before they launch. We'll likely never know exactly what happened, but I'd like to talk today about 3 key ingredients that I saw missing: culture, communication, and accountability. Starting a new remote studio is exciting and a big challenge. I've had the good fortune to do this a couple of times. I call this model the well-funded startup because you can focus on building the studio, the culture, and the game versus figuring out where your next dollar is coming from. It's still a startup. You still have to worry about everything else. You need desks, office space, you have to hire the team, you need to buy office supplies, and most importantly, you have to figure out what game you're making, and you have to build a team and culture to deliver it. There's never enough time to get it all done, and if you want to succeed, you work incredibly hard.
Building a studio from the ground up in a new location takes time.
So starting a studio is hard in the best of times, and the last few years have not been the best of times. And my heart goes out to this team. What a challenge. I know people love working from home, but it's very difficult to get momentum with a new team and build a culture if you're working remote.
One word to describe the initiative. Right now, it's ambition.
It can be done, but it's much harder. And this brings us to the first missing ingredient. Culture simply means the set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organization. In this article by Video Games Chronicle, you can see the issue. Although the initiative's website claims that the company promotes a collaborative, creative environment, former employees describe the studio's development hierarchy as very top-down, with Gallagher and Neuberger keeping a strong grasp on creative decisions. I find this comment interesting because collaboration simply means that we've all agreed to work together on something, in this case, making a game. It doesn't mean everyone gets to be involved in every decision. It's a good thing that the design director is keeping a strong grasp on creative decisions. This is normal. It's his job. Keep in mind, everybody's got an opinion on the game. You have opinions from the team, the fans, Microsoft, external partners. That passion is great, but somebody still has to bring a lens to focus those opinions and decide what feedback makes the game better. The best designers I've worked with know how to gather opinions, make decisions, and then nicely tell the team what they've decided. They close the loop on the feedback. And that may be the actual problem, that they weren't communicating what they decided and why. But we'll get to that in a minute. Reading further, the article goes on to say, according to former employees, many senior team members were frustrated by this perceived lack of autonomy. The whole point of having a team is that it allows you to divide up the work and get more done. The goal is for everyone to have as much autonomy as possible. With a new team, it takes time to develop that working arrangement, also known as culture. And even if you define who owns what up front, it's going to evolve as the team understands the game they're making and they hire new people. And when I say team and culture, I'm including the development partners. Early on, the initiative collaborated with Certain Affinity, and now they are working with Crystal Dynamics. Both are very experienced studios. According to IGN, you can see there were difficulties with integrating the teams and developing the culture. As the initiative began to staff up, the 2 studios found themselves with numerous senior staff roles duplicated across both offices whose visions often clashed. It's normal to staff up and to find overlap and have to make changes. It's a dynamic system. When you add new people, you have to figure this out because people in the games industry are very talented. You never know who's going to have what skill set and who you're going to be able to hire. So as you hire more people, you have to figure out where roles overlap, and then you have to define who owns what and communicate it. Once everyone knows what they're building and how they fit in, there's more autonomy on the team because there's more alignment. This is part of what you're figuring out early on. Further on, the article goes on to say, we were set up in a way where no one at the remote studio reported to anyone at our studio, one person recalled. Only the top-level management had any established accountability relationship. This is the way game partnerships work. Accountability is through the contract, and with the leaders that negotiated that contract. I worked on Gears of War with Epic. Their producers didn't report to me. There is no independent developer in the industry that is going to agree to have people that they've hired report to a remote team. It just doesn't happen. The fact that this person didn't understand something so basic is a problem, and that brings us to our second missing ingredient, communication. I've reviewed hundreds of game postmortems, and I can tell you that communication is always on the list. Always. It's difficult to get a team moving in one direction and keep momentum over a multi-year development cycle without rigor around communication. And even with your best efforts, things still fall through the cracks. Let me give you an example. When I was the producer on Crimson Skies, our design lead, John, owned the design vision, and he kept it documented in a specification. He'd be up late at night making sure that all of the feedback got incorporated back into the spec. If you wanted to know what was decided, you read it. Now, on most postmortems, the problem was that the design decisions never got documented anywhere. The design documentation was never kept up to date. The only way that you could figure out what was going on was to talk to someone. Well, with Crimson Skies, we didn't have that problem. Our problem with communication was that nobody read the spec.
Oops!
There are many tools that you can use to document your decisions. And the reason you document is so people can find the information for themselves. Trying to track someone down and ask a question is really hard. It takes a lot of time, particularly when everyone's working remotely. I personally like tracking issues in a bug database because everyone on the team is familiar with it and it's easy to search. That said, many tools can work. And again, this is part of the culture. You decide on the tools that will work best for your team, you try it, and if it's not working, you fix it. Not only do you document, I found it's important for leads to push critical information out to the team versus expecting them to discover it. When I say leads, I mean not only the leads of art, design, audio, test, code, I also mean the producers. At the end of the day, communication is a large part of their job. People are busy, and producers in particular have to meet the team more than halfway on communication. If the team is confused, the producer needs to find a new way to get the message across. Communication, like game making, is an iterative process, and it's going to have to evolve over the life cycle of the game. I want to go back to this comment from earlier and cover the second part. According to former employees, many senior team members were frustrated by this perceived lack of autonomy and didn't feel heard on key issues such as development priorities, project planning, and team staffing. If the team didn't feel heard, that could mean it's because nobody was looping back to them to tell them what was decided and why. And notice the comments aren't just about design, it's about the entire project. Having the team know that you heard their feedback is very critical. It's important they know that you heard it, and it's important they understand why you're not adopting their idea. After that loop is closed, then everyone moves forward. This is sometimes really hard. It's hard to tell someone who's passionate and loves the game that the idea they came up with doesn't fit the vision and you're not doing it. People don't like to hear that, but it has to happen. It has to happen all the time because there are a million ideas that come in for the game, and somebody has to decide. So sometimes people's feelings can get hurt. What this means is that the team should vigorously present their ideas and discuss, and eventually someone is going to decide, and then you keep going. They have to disagree, but commit. Closing communication loops is easy to do, but it's a lot of work. And as you saw with Crimson Skies, you never completely win. Something always falls through the cracks, but you still have to try, because a good culture and great communication are key ingredients to shipping a great game. Then there's the third ingredient, accountability. I blame the initiative, said one former employee. I don't blame our development partners. We chose not to hold anyone accountable to the vision, and we just kept trying things. It was not that we didn't know what we wanted, it was that we kept making things that weren't what we wanted, said one of the initiative developers. We'd do it over and over again. The levels we had when I left weren't the same ones we'd had 3 months prior or 3 months prior to that. I don't know why people just kept hitting the reset button. A little rework early on is normal. You're trying to figure out what game you're building. Pushing the reset button every 3 months is not. Reading further, some blame leadership. But as Perfect Dark moved into its second and third year, sources tell us that process began to drag on much longer than expected, as leadership's refusal to commit to any specific ideas or shape for the game began to frustrate both teams. Well, was it leadership's inability to pick a direction, or was it the team not liking the direction and not listening? This is a huge red flag, and somebody from Xbox needed to figure out what was going on and hold people accountable. Holding teams accountable is difficult. Figuring out what's broken and fixing it is really hard. I've been a producer and I've had to do this many times. It's hard because you have to talk to a lot of people, you have to look through a lot of data. You play the game builds, and it just takes time to figure out the actual problem you were trying to solve. And usually, as it seems here, it's multiple problems. Once you've defined the issues, you can make changes that will fix them, and that leads to hard conversations with people that aren't getting it done. It's not fun, but it's a necessary part of making a successful game. And I would argue it's a lot better than shipping Redfall, which wasn't good for anyone, particularly the fans. And that's why you do it. The team isn't accountable to the producer or even to Microsoft. They're accountable to one another. If someone isn't following through on a commitment, they've let the team down, they've let the fans down, and most importantly, they've let themselves down. Starting a new studio is really hard, and making a game in today's environment is a difficult task, but it can be done. That's why these things we've talked about are so important. You have to define your culture, how you're going to work early on. You need good leaders that hear the team, make decisions, and then communicate the new vision. And you need accountability. Everyone has to be accountable to their commitments, to the team, and again, most importantly, to themselves. I'm rooting for the Initiative Studio. I think it was very smart of them to sign Crystal Dynamics to work with them. It sounds like those teams have worked together before, and so they know each other, and they can build on that shared culture that they already have. Hopefully, that will give them some momentum, and it won't be long before we see their shared vision come to life. I can't wait.
Did you find the answers you were looking for, Agent Dark?
Not yet. This is just the beginning.